That will never work. You can't put yourself seriously. Don't. Oh my God, that's everything. That's bad. You probably should find other hobbies. You ever learn how to stop? Stop. You don't. Don't bother me. I've seen better people. Do you really want to and great. Get up. Welcome to Horrible Writing, the rawest, most candid, in-your-face writing show on the interwebs because none of us have time to suck. Let's do this. Welcome to episode 63 of Horrible Writing. I am Paul Sading, your host. With me today, I have none other than Ashley Quach, the writer. A writer and illustrator, but the writer of Deck the Halls with Matrimony! Series. And she also did the illustration for the children's book, Santa's Husband. You can find her and her comics over at Sasquatch, not to be confused with Sasquatch.com, and follow the show on Twitter at Sasquatch Radio, all one word. Of course, I will put all these links in the show notes. Ashley, welcome to Horrible Writing.
Hey there, buddy.
All right. So you and I just had a great time on the Patreon exclusive, which was a whole lot of fun.
So fun.
And it's going to be really a hard left turn here. So this is going to be interesting how we do this together. When we talked, you had some great ideas for a topic today to discuss as far as the writer/creative journey. And it's one that I think the vast majority of us can relate to because of how we go about doing what we do, writing, creating. Kind of have to do that in a vacuum in order to really reach those places where our stories take us. So asking you about the show, you throwing topics at me, and you pitched loneliness as a topic. And I said, yes, nobody's talked about that with me yet. And that is such a great thing to talk about. It has to have the right person to deliver the message. You are that right person. So why loneliness?
Believe it or not, loneliness is usually my starting place for writing anything with a romantic plot. I feel like that loneliness is especially fascinating because it is usually symptomatic of need. Mm-hmm. It indicates an absence. And if there is an absence, if there is a need, then that need can be met. And so in writing something romantic that is going to be successful, really it's about creating two characters with needs that match each other. And because it's romance, loneliness is usually somewhat incorporated within that need. So it's just something I find myself thinking about a lot, usually in the beginning of writing phases. And it's just such an interesting emotional state because
Mm-hmm.
it's temporary, and it's not like grief, it's not like sadness, it's not like depression. It can flare up so quickly and then be gone again. It's like a flash flood, and it's got this crazy kind of urgency. I think we've all been there in moments where you're so lonely you cannot see straight, and who hasn't texted an ex at 2:00 in the morning or sent out an invitation to a friend and then been rejected and then felt that wave again. It's so universal and it's so intense, and you can do so many different things with it. It's just something I think about a lot.
One of the reasons I got so excited that you pitched it was, I don't know if this is, part of toxic masculinity or not, but as a guy, I don't hear a lot of me and my people like me talking about it. It's almost like you've got to be very vulnerable mm-hmm. to even start exploring this. So when you pitched it, I was like, hell yeah. If nothing else, it'll give me an excuse to explore it along with her. So has it always been easy or difficult for you to talk about? Because it's a common, like you just so eloquently put, we all go through this, and it's so intense that it almost demands all of our faculties whenever it decides to strike. But you, in that first answer, you displayed a lot of, for me at least, a lot of reflection. You've reflected on this aspect of life quite a lot. How did you get there? Was this easy for you, or was there any, as much as you're comfortable sharing, was there something that kind of forced you to work through this yourself?
So jumping back just a tiny bit, you were talking about whether or not it's easy to discuss, and absolutely not. Like even with a great deal of reflection, absolutely not. And that's, again, part of what makes it such an appealing thing to write about, because it's so intense and it's so difficult because it seems silly. It seems frivolous because it has that transient kind of expression, because it comes so quickly and then it goes quickly. You end up feeling like it's silly, or maybe it doesn't matter, and you feel like you shouldn't say something about it. It can be so hard to just. It's such a strange, simple thing to say. I feel lonely. It's so hard to say that to somebody else. It's damn near impossible. So for me, as far as how I came to reflect on this, I think, and again, a lot of it was, I before Deck the Halls, romantic comedy was a genre that I visited occasionally, but was not something that I focused entirely on. But in facing with after the first Deck the Halls came out, and we had so much fun with it, and we decided to do more of them. And then, of course, the more you do a certain genre, the more people request that you do a certain genre. Going back to the same well again and again really, of course, made me think about the things that made that well appealing to me. And as I mentioned, it really is. It's I find a great deal of comfort in painting this picture of someone, of this fantasy of having a need and then having someone else being generous enough to give to you, for comfort, for companionship, whatever the particular plot entails. So in doing so, I've reflected a great deal, not just on my own loneliness and moments of that in life, but more in the ways that I have failed friends or loved ones in their moments of loneliness. I think times when you look back and you recognize, like, I could have been more present in that moment. I could have been a better help in that moment. I think that is, I feel like that is really been something that's driven a lot of my writing more than my own experiences with it.
When you're thinking about and reflecting on sensitivity, loneliness, right? Is it because you yourself as a human being are sensitive to that? You're very aware of that demand on you, on your psychological demand. I'm lonely, fill this need for me. Or is it more of like an altruistic, just social awareness of the topic itself? So does it really have like a personal pull, or is it?
It's a lot because I feel these feelings very hard myself, and so when I see other friends who experience it, it's difficult to feel to have empathy for that moment, but also to feel somewhat restricted in being able to help, I guess. Sometimes I feel like I'm all thumbs, when I'm with, in certain emotional situations, which is funny considering the work that I do. But I feel like that's probably true of a lot of writers, that, we're sometimes a little better on the page, than, in person.
Yeah. Yes. So with this, then, you using this as somewhat of a framework for your creative muse, is this, how does this drive for you? Is it something you're creatively exploring? I mean, I write horror. I don't plan on going out and mutilating people anytime soon, but I love using the muse to explore what that experience would be like. So for you, when you're talking about this topic, and as it relates to your own writing? Is it somewhat of a creative exploration? Is it a catharsis? Is it something else entirely different?
I feel like it would be too glib for me to say it's self-medication.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly is to a certain length. And sometimes it's a lot of times when I do write, especially since the first deck the halls, which I mean a lot of what I write, I do write for specific people. So
Okay.
a lot of times when I write, if I'm writing something for a specific person, a lot of times it's a gesture. And again, it's that gesture of love and friendship, of this is what I wish you could have. I wish this feeling for
Yeah.
you. Um, you know, I think I've talked before with First Deck the Halls. I wrote for my friend Jessica, who was going through med school, and she was super duper into Hallmark Christmas movies. And so writing it was for her. It was saying, you know, you've been very stressed out. This is something that gives you happiness. This is for you, and it's doing all your favorite moves the best that I could do them, you know. And something I'm currently there was something I actually just wrote a few weeks ago that was, again, it was an idea that came up when I was out with a friend, and I got a great deal of pleasure in pursuing writing this expression for her, because she was, you know, she was in a place where she needed some cheering up.
Mm-hmm.
And this was the ultimate in crazy wish fulfillment, writing the best comfort food I could, you know. It's like when someone's sick and you make them macaroni and cheese, you know,
Mm-hmm.
or soup. And so a lot of times it's coming from a very specific place. And I find I write a lot
Yeah.
faster when I have a fixed point, when I have something very specific that I want to say to another human being. It makes the romance much easier to write, because really you're expressing your own strong feelings of love for the person. You're just putting it into a very attractive face.
Mm-hmm. All right. No, that is no. So I could, even though we're completely different type of genre aim with our stuff, I can totally relate to what you were just saying there.
Mm-hmm.
Now, for you personally, so we can get to know you a little bit better, as much as, again, as you're comfortable sharing, what is the worst thing for you about being lonely? And then, because I don't like focusing on that, what's the best thing about being lonely
Oh gosh.
for you, Ashley?
The worst. All right. I guess it's two sides of the same coin. What's that song? Riley Kiley has the song "Better Son, Better Daughter," and there's a line. Sometimes when you're on, you're really effing on. But the lows are so extreme that the good feels effing cheap. And
Yeah.
I feel like that's such a great expression of it. So for, you know, because for me, it's two sides of the same coin. Like, the worst of loneliness is when it is expressed in the presence of other people, feeling isolated when you are just in the face of any kind of social exchange, where you end up feeling like you're not being heard, where you are or feeling unwelcome, or just feeling out of place.
Mm-hmm.
My co-producer Paula tells me that whenever I write a fish out of water story, she always remarks on that. She says that that's my strength. And I know that's where it comes from. And it can be it's difficult to be in a situation where the social onus is on you to continue talking, but you can tell the person is not interested or not listening.
Yes.
But in addition to that, I feel like there's also the added flavor of, if you've ever been the kind of person that doesn't, if you are socially what is not expected of the group, and you have to sort of play along as if you are. And I've had that significantly frequently in a number of different walks of life. You know, like when I was in North Carolina, you know, I was a church going kid, and like I was never really someone who exactly fit in with the church going kids. Like for, I don't know, I didn't know how to do it right.
Right.
And then, you know, being a woman, but you know, you're never the right kind of woman.
Yeah.
You know, I'm a very tall and loud person. Well, infrequently loud, but I'm talking very gently because I've got a microphone a foot from me. But I tell you, God, if you get me in a room and get me to describe, no, seriously, if you get me to describe like either the latest plot of the movie that I saw or whatever I'm working on, it gets loud real quick.
I laugh because that's my daily experience. My wife is exactly. Are you a Modern Family fan by any chance?
Yes, have not. I'm far behind on all TV shows.
Oh, well, that's okay. This reference is like 3 or 4 seasons old, but my wife is so loud that when there was an episode a couple seasons ago, fans, if you don't know the show, I apologize, but I feel like I'm connecting with Ashley right now, so I've got to share this. Jay is looking for, I've got Sophia's character names block in my brain now. His wife. Gloria.
Yes.
So Jay is looking for Gloria. Gloria's in the mansion somewhere, and he's looking up the stairs, and or she's looking up the stairs. She's looking for Jay. Sorry, got him in reverse. Gloria's looking for Jay. He's in the mansion somewhere, and she's yelling his name, and she's extremely loud all the time. And he's standing right next to her, right behind her, and he says, "Gloria, I'm right here." I literally had to pause that episode because I was laughing so hard that I was crying because that's my 10 times a day, I'll tell my wife, "Babe, I'm right here." So when you say that, that's why I laughed, because I can go, I get her. I totally get her. So going back to that answer right there. I mean, that was such a great answer. I could relate to that. I've been in a room with hundreds of people before and felt completely alone because it was just not my place. For you, how exhausting is that on a personal and creative level? And if it's not, that's okay. It's just, that may be me ascribing my own reaction to that kind of stuff.
Oh no, it is. I was going to say that the good side of loneliness, or the flip side. I'm someone who I don't mind being alone a lot of the time. I don't mind being alone with my thoughts. I find a great deal, well, most of the time, I find a great deal of comfort from my thoughts when I am left to them, as it were. The time when my thoughts are less welcoming is usually as a result from the bad side of it, which is when you've been in a social situation where you feel like you did all the wrong things, and then your brain just won't shut up about it for the rest of the night. It's a little tiresome in certain seasons more than others. Doing the whole Hollywood writer thing, you have to get in a room and pitch with people. There's nothing more exhausting. It feels like getting hit by a truck. Because there's so much anxiety leading into it. There's so many nerves and the preparation, and it's you're trying to keep one thought in your head and banish all the others. It's just like keeping all of your muscles tensed, but it's brain muscles, and
Yeah.
And then you don't know what the room's going to be like till you're in the room, and even when it goes well, sometimes it doesn't go. It's that can be. I feel like that is harder sometimes than the writing itself. Like that's it, because it's asking people again and again, like me, believe in this, and it's very difficult to garner the reaction you want. It's what are you gonna do? It's like dating, right. I guess. Most of the people you interact with are not your true love. But then also it can be tough just because being social is a large part of the job, and I think the thing I struggle the most with is feeling like somewhat disingenuous, feeling like because you have the party personality that's very big and gregarious and has the funny story about the crazy guy you saw at the movies. I don't know, like you have the persona that's really big and really out there and just on and entertaining. And it's so different from who you are in your office with your computer, which feels that the me in the office with the computer feels more like the real me,
Yeah.
And so having the divide between those two, I think, is probably the most exhausting part of that. Life is a series of personalities. Like, I feel like I embody a different persona for when I'm directing with Deck the Halls. I probably have a different persona with the people that I work with on a regular basis. It's just but I think the party me and the office me are the most different, but also the most frequently brought out of the bag, and that's why the divide feels probably the most exhausting.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes absolute sense. So this show is listened to by people who for the most part, have a real desire to find that, that love for writing again. It's there. It's flirting with them, from across the room. They need to cross the room to get to it. Or people early in their writing journey / publishing journey. Maybe they've been writing for years, but they're really now starting out publishing. So for the most part, a lot of folks who are still drinking from the fire hose, trying to learn all the challenges that go with being a creative. And that's why I do this show, is to try to, through other people's experiences, try to, lend that hand out to lift others up. So in all of your thoughts and experiences with loneliness and how you've reflected on it, and you've got such a firm grasp on it, for anyone, it doesn't have to be the new writer, anyone listening, but for anybody who is listening, what would be your recommendations when it comes to counteracting or balancing, the impact or the effects of loneliness?
Oh gosh.
Especially with that bent on, I need to go create good stuff and not let that bleed over into it.
Counteract the loneliness within yourself or within other people?
Well, for themselves, and that self-care type thing. What has been your experience, or what have you found helpful, so that you can keep writing, you can tap into that muse and keep writing and creating on the level that you expect of yourself?
The truth is that I find so much comfort in writing. I feel like that is the medicine within itself. And part of it is that the type of people and situations that I tend to write are usually, as I mentioned, are often meant to be antidotes to loneliness. I write about people that make each other less lonely. And so it has that added effect of me giving comfort to myself and giving company to myself. I am a big fan of the phrase, I don't know if I heard this somewhere, if I just started saying it at some point, friendship porn, because
I've never heard that before.
So for example, a show like Scrubs, or like The Good Place, I feel like it gets a lot of steam from, you have people who are being the kinds of friends that you wish you had in life. People who are honest with each other, that are really tapped into each other's cares, that are, if they do cause pain or if they do cause offense, then they're very quick to mend. It's conscientiousness that can sometimes only exist in a fictitious place, because in real life there's so much room for, people are busy, people misunderstand each other. People, as I mentioned earlier, have a really hard time just saying the very simple thing of, I am lonely, I need company. In a TV show, no one ever has to say that, because the friend is already there. They anticipate. So there's certainly that aspect. And I know certainly for Deck the Halls, that's been a driving force in all 3 seasons, is that's really the well we go to over and over. Because honestly, for romantic stories, you're kind of limited to a couple of major tent poles. You know, you have the meet cute, you have like the moment where they start to sort of realize there's some chemistry. There's a little bit of tension and like, oh my God, something's going wrong in like later act 2. And then like things get worked out, big kiss finish, done. Like that's pretty standard. You know, it's, you know, you ring those bells and you're done. And then there's like a lot of other space to occupy.
Right.
And so for that, like, I feel like there's so many deep wells to explore because there's so many different kinds of friends. There's so many different kinds of acquaintances. And there's just a rainbow of ways that we, you know, surprise and also disappoint each other. And there's just something about it. There's something very comforting listening to people that have a rapport with each other. It sort of breaks down that fourth wall and it makes you feel like you're part of this group. And I love shows that do that. I love that feeling in fiction. And it's, I mean, that for me, that is always a very satisfying, that's a satisfying place to occupy in your imagination. And so, yeah, so that, and I thinking about sitting down with a new idea when you're shaping these people out, you get to a certain point where it is like getting to know someone new. You're becoming friends or you're falling in love with someone new, depending on which kind of story you're writing. And it's I'm in a first draft place right now where I've got this feeling. I'm an old married fogey, and it's been a very long time since I've had a first kiss with anybody. But like there is that feeling that comes with when the first kiss is coming. You're in the room, you're in the moment, you know it's coming, but it hadn't come yet, and it feels a little skittish. But it's really invigorating. And I tend to feel that way in when I'm outlining or in a first draft. It's there's just something about it. It occupies your heart in a way where there's not really room to feel lonely, I guess.
Kelvin tried to speak, but his throat cracked. He gasped for air. Love bent down and kissed his forehead. Elsa rested her hand in the middle of his chest. Love's eyes wet even as Kelvin's began to cry. It will hurt for a while. Her mouth turned down as she ran a light thumb over his lips. And it will pass in time, like all things do. This excerpt is from my horror anthology, 12 Deaths of Christmas, available in ebook and paperback on Amazon. It's funny how it manifests in different people, isn't it? You know, when, like you talked about, when I asked you that, you went straight to actual writing is where, you know, one of the beneficial things. And as you were answering that, I was, you know, walking parallel to you just in a horror track. And, and I think it's very interesting how you react to loneliness and what you shared compared to how I do and how that manifests in the different genres, because I can use mine to really go into those dark places that I need to go tell the stories that I want to tell. Whereas you do the same thing. It's just it's a completely different genre and different aim. I love humans. We're such interesting species, such an interesting species.
It's really funny. The difference between me before I wrote and me now, like the level of healthiness.
Yes.
I think I was a much needier person or really just like didn't know what to do with my emotions, you know, it felt like a fire hose, you know, like, which may also be the age that I was, you know, teens and 20s, but just the difference in feeling and just being able to put those feelings somewhere.
It may be, but I'll bet you it's like you said, the writing itself.
It's definitely,
it gives you that chance to explore. It's cathartic. You can reflect. You can go as dark as you want to go, and you're still safe doing it.
I went on a playwriting retreat last month, and this is one where I ended up writing a play for somebody in my class, and but I ended up writing for like 14 hours straight. It was
wow.
It's like I got the idea, and then I was like, if I don't do it right now, I'm not gonna have time to do it till next year. So and they were kind of they weren't like laughing and making fun of me, but they were
right.
They kept saying that they'd never seen anybody do it before. But my husband says the same thing. Like he keeps trying to tell me to get up and take breaks and walk around, because I'll die with a hunchback, but the truth is, it's like, it really is. Oh man, it is intoxicating once you get in.
It is. No, it totally is. Speaking of intoxication, Horrible Writing fans are absolutely addicted to a specific segment of this show. Now, if this is your first time listening to the show, welcome, and thank you for giving it a chance. You may be following Ashley here. Cool. I hope you have enjoyed this so far, and I hope you stay out for many, many episodes to follow, because I really get to talk to some awesome people. But one thing that I do to all guests, being the good host that I am, is I ask them not only to come on and share all this personal stuff, but also to share something from their past. And I call it the horrible writing experience. So I'm not doing this to pick on Ashley or embarrass her or anything like that. There is a method to my madness. I believe that when you have people like Ashley come on and share, I have no idea what she's going to share. I intentionally do not prep for this. I believe that when they come on and they share this one experience that they consider a horrible writing experience, whatever that is, that we see, because we know where she is now, and we get to get that flashback scene of her backstory, where she's been, and we get to put those two, we get to juxtapose those and put them next to each other and go, wow, she got through that and she's here. I can do it too. So Ashley, with that very monumentous lead in, what is your horrible writing experience?
Okay. So this is one of those horrible writing experiences that is beneficial in the long run. I mean, I think probably most bad writing experiences, they're all building blocks. But this is something where I feel very torn about, because I think it's terrible, and I don't think that all right, I'm just going to get into it. So we'll summarize at the end. Okay. So my first paid writing job in Hollywood was a rewrite job. And I'd never signed an NDA, but also there's still an option on the materials. So I am going to be very obscure with some of these details.
No worries.
We'll say it was a horse movie. It was one of those things where it was sentimental, and it was I was brought on to make it more family friendly and to push it into more of a comedy area, because before I came on, it was very sad. Like, I don't think the animal died originally, but it was like borderline, it came real close. Right. It was a real tearjerker. And there was I think there was a 30-page scene where the animal was like, will the animal die? We don't know. And I was like, 30 pages is too long to keep an animal in peril, So I was brought on to punch it up, to make it more like a Disney movie. It was not a Disney movie, but that was my end game. And so, it was a very, very, very small amount of money. It's one of those, a lot of new writers sort of get brought in with this bait of, here's how much we will pay you if the movie goes forward. Here's how much we're going to pay you now. And it's infinitesimal. Mm. But the check cleared and I didn't have anything else going on. So, I went for it. And so over the course of a little less than a year, I maybe 8 to 10 months, I rewrote this script 5 times at least. And that is not counting drafts within drafts. I mean, like total course changes. Like we changed the plot quite drastically about 5 times. And at some point, like I was briefly taken off the project and they brought the first writer back in, and then they were like, oh, right. And then I got brought back on for the final draft. And it was it was one of those things where it started out as a love fest, which most writing for hire situations do. They bring you in because they love you. They bring you in because they're crazy about what you do. And the room is filled with compliments. And then a couple of drafts pass. And sometimes, like for reasons beyond yours or your boss's control, the target moves. And so in this particular situation, the financing for the movie was tied up within a certain entity that had different requirements, and those, as we went on, some of those requirements would sometimes shift and change. So this was the situation where I had a overall plot, like a general cast of characters and an animal that had to be in there, and then I had a list of requirements. These kinds of scenes must happen, and so it was an engineering feat more than anything. I had to make those 2 lists become one. And that in itself is an incredibly valuable writing exercise, because it's all writers feel very personal about their work. Sometimes it might not be a bad thing to take something that is not personal to you and then just be forced to make it a movie you care about, or to make it a project you care about. And then of course there was the added challenge / benefit of writing for a producer who who was, very, very quick on the notes turnaround. And like again, like I said, we did a ton of drafts of this project, and there is something to getting through the pain of having to do notes. Like it's one of those things where I feel like I've emotionally lost contact a little bit, because I know how painful it is to get notes. I know it's very difficult to put yourself out there, but I kind of went through the fire with this project where, every time I sent off a draft, by the next day I'd have a list. And there was something about that kind of broke me. You get to the point where it becomes, you develop this muscle and it just becomes like a machine, but it does help you get some emotional distance from it, where it's never that you're a bad writer, and it's not that you can't, it's not that you can't get this project done. It's just that it's not where it is yet. You learn the difference between genuine bad writing and just early draft, I guess.
Right.
So there's certainly value to that. And I know that working in that year made me a much more efficient writer. It made me much more attuned to the kinds of things that that producers pick up on when they read something, and also just like the kinds of silly things that end up holding up the works. You start to learn after a situation like that how little it often has to do with you.
Yeah.
How much there is outside of your control. And honestly, doing that was a large reason of why I wanted to do Deck the Halls, was because I had control. I could put it on the page. I knew when it was done, and we went forward. There was no one else above the ladder who needed to say yes. And I don't think I would have done that if I had not been for having had a few jobs where you jump through all the hoops and then it still doesn't pan out.
And that's a great point too, is, being cognizant of that too. And I think some of us, we get it can be so discouraging because of like what we've been talking about, working in the silo, being alone, the loneliness factor of it. And if we don't focus our attention on those positive aspects, not only just the loneliness that we've been talking about, but things like this with this experience and what it could have done to you if you weren't ready with that mindset. I mean, I don't know where you were then and if you've developed this mindset since then. But I mean, we know that there are folks who maybe wouldn't have reacted as well and as healthy as you have. And, taking the positive, looking at what you're doing now and going, hey, maybe this is a little byproduct of that, and contributing that type of stuff to the world. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that I really geek out about, because how many lives are you enriching? And in part, at least, it goes back to this experience that you had there and your refusal to quit or have that damage you to where you stop creating. That's an empowering message. It really is.
I see the wear and tear that it wrecks on colleagues of mine in Los Angeles that are in the screenwriting game. It's the number of factors, the lack of power that you have, like the lack of ability that you have to tell. Like there's someone, I think it was Eric Heiser, who he wrote, but he was also the executive producer on Arrival. But he talked about how everyone in the room gets to say when the script is ready, except for the writer in Hollywood. The actors, the director, the producers, everyone else signs off, but the writer, it's very strange. And I think most writers, once they've been going for a while, like I think a lot of us, that we know, you get to a certain point, and I feel like this is when I started to feel like I was a competent writer, when I got to the point where I could recognize errors or faults in my drafts and recognize when it wasn't all the way there yet, even if I couldn't figure out the solution right away. If I knew that there was something deficient, there's something about that makes me feel much calmer. Like if I'm aware of my failings, being able to recognize your own failings means that you may be able to find a solution just because you are looking for one. But anyway, it's just the desire to make things that entertain you, to make things that please you. That it's very empowering to just entertain yourself. And so novelists get to do that, and independent artists, audio drama producers that are independent, we get to do a lot of that. And you're not always you're very seldom afforded that opportunity if you go the Hollywood route, because that's not why you're there.
Right. No, and I love it. And it's one of those things that, as a slight futurist, I often ponder, what our grandkids will be looking at when they see Hollywood, because of, all things staying the same in terms of freedom of expression and technology and whatnot, and gig economies and things like that. Somebody like you, who we don't know 50 years from now what things are going to be like, but it's just that draw of being able to do these things for the right reasons. And I think art is so much fresher when we get to, like you were explaining so well, I could just picture that room full of all these people who didn't create the story. And as you were saying that, I was going, this is why so many movies are exactly the same, just with different titles. I
will say though, that is, I don't want to devalue what executives bring to the table, because you have the flip side where a creator will amass a certain amount of power, and then no one gets to say no anymore. And I've known and worked with some executives who are wonderful problem solvers, because if that is actually your job, a lot of the time is to look over a draft and be like, this needs to change, this needs to change, this needs to change, goodbye. It's and I so cherish people. It's such an amazing talent. And so it's a real mix, because of course people get into this game with different kinds of motivations. So I certainly don't want to paint the picture that executives are all just there to say no. Usually they're there to just find the way to yes.
So now that you have given so much of yourself to folks today, we got to give you a chance to talk about you and your work that we've been hinting at throughout this. So what do you have going on? What would you like to introduce Horrible Writing listeners to, and maybe what we can expect from you in the future?
Oh gosh. Well, the project currently open in my on my laptop is we're working on season 3 of Deck the Halls. Hopefully by the time this interview airs, it should be around Thanksgiving. And I'm hoping we're able to release on Thanksgiving again, although we will I don't know if I will know that for sure until we start making our way through our final cut, which is usually in November. We're always working right up to the end. It's like building a train while it's like building tracks in front of a train that's coming.
So true.
And the project is we started doing it right after the election in 2016. That was actually our first rehearsal, was the day after the election, believe it or not. And it started out as a very small project. It was just my co-producer Paula and I, and our cast of actors, and our music guy and our sound guy, and like we just banged it out. We banged out the first one, I think, in a month. It was a crazy turnaround. I do not recommend it for anybody. But we had such a good time doing it. We had such a wonderful time. Paula and I joked quite a bit when we were putting out the first one that there were jokes in there. Because again, I was fresh off the horse movie, quote unquote. Wink, 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 wink. But I was fresh off of that project, and I kept joking with her about these jokes that were in Deck the Halls that would not have made it past my coworkers on that other movie because they were all men. And so whenever I would pitch things or that were from a particularly female perspective, I got a lot of pushback in the room because they would be like, that's not a thing. So for example, in the first Deck the Halls, we have a joke about Botox in the armpit, which like in our rehearsal, all the girls at the table knew what that was for, and the guys did not. You know,
right?
Do you know what Botox in the armpit's for?
It would be my guess, because I don't know. My guess would be about some kind of enhancements.
It's for sweating.
What?
Yeah, like if you have a problem with sweating too much,
no clue.
You get Botox in the armpits, bing, bang, boom. You know, it's like,
oh my God.
Yeah. Or like we have another joke in there about a bolero. We're speaking very ill of a bolero, and that's a loaded statement. And actually, I saw a very similar joke on Miss Maisel. And it made me laugh because I'm like, women, we know what that means. You know, if someone says you need a bolero, it means you have fat arms. Like,
God, I am learning so much today.
There are all these things, just this invisible world. I was talking to a friend about this because, you know, my husband's Chinese, and I'm. You know, when we go and visit his family, like it is, you know, it's a different environment, very obviously. Like people are speaking a different language. You know, we're making different kinds of food. There are different rules of etiquette. You know, just to show respect. It is very clearly a different space, and there is the same kind of invisible rules and invisible etiquette that exist in women's lives, things that we have to do, that we have to be aware of, that we are exposed to, that is invisible to outsiders sometimes. And but because men and women exist in the same space with fewer barriers, you know, there's not like a language barrier to signal you, this is a different space you're stepping into. There's not like, you know, it's someone who's sitting right next to you, you're not aware that there's a different set of rules. And it's, you know, like, I mean, one time my husband and I were walking back from Target, and I told, you know, he tried to cross the street, and I was like, no, we don't cross till 2 more blocks down. And he's like, why? I'm like, well, that goes along a lot of bushes and empty buildings. Like someone could jump out at us. And my husband was like, what do you mean? And I'm like, never mind. You don't think about it, but I think about it. I'm going to deal with that. but it's stuff like that where the things that we think about, the things that we might reference in humor, just because it is invisible, you know, to a gentleman doesn't mean that it's not gonna resonate. Right. You know,
that's why I give you so much credit for writing comedy. It's not easy, and it's so important to do because it can introduce, it's a safe way to introduce these, like you're talking about, these foreign concepts that are behind these, these walls that we aren't even aware of. And for edification, if nothing else, to help people learn to see a perspective, to understand an experience. But it is so hard to do in comedy. Oh gosh, I give you credit. I really do.
It's like, well, it's just one of those things where comedy is nice because it can allow you to create pictures that might be otherwise, I don't know how to best put this. It can allow you to address situations or circumstances that might be construed as unpleasant or a stressful topic. But it allows you to address it in a way that goes down a little smoother. It's the spoonful of sugar. I was talking actually about Kathy Comics on Twitter a little while ago today. Kathy gets a bad rap, like people no, seriously, people have this idea of her being like shoes, chocolate, but actually, if you go back and you look at the comics from the 80s, she talks about, Kathy gets sexually harassed by her boss. Her boss forcibly kisses her and she punches him in the face and knocks him out. And then she worries she's going to lose her job. She addresses unpaid maternity leave. She addresses negotiating for a salary. Like, there are multiple comic strip story threads within Kathy Comics where she is negotiating for a higher salary. It's incredible. And like, it's one of those things where, like, how many other regular sources of media in that time frame were you really seeing a woman negotiating for money? And it was in the comics. That's what's crazy. And she kind of gets a bad rap for being shoes and chocolate, and there's plenty of that in there, but it's surprisingly complex. And actually, Kathy Guisewite, when she was first syndicated as a comics artist, she was still working at an advertising agency, and she was keeping the whole comics thing a secret because she was afraid that it would embarrass her professionally. I don't know. Full credit to Kathy Guisewite. Yeah. But so there's the with the Deck the Halls, especially Deck the Halls 2. Like, Deck the Halls 1, because when I wrote it so specifically as a Hallmark movie. So a lot of the things that I touch on are with a very, very light hand. And season 2, I wrote it during 2017. We were all having a bad year in 2017. But there were a lot of things that I went for with my teeth out a little more than I might have otherwise. Did you notice that the climate, maybe even you weren't aware of it in the actual writing, maybe when you went back and edited it, but did you notice that your comedy became, I don't want to say more aggressive, but edgier, maybe we'll say edgier. Because of the climate you were writing in? I think it would be a stretch to call my comedy edgy. I was struggling for an adjective. So part of it is that, like, I really, it was a struggle to keep everything so light in the first Deck the Halls because I had to really keep it clean. Everyone's got to have perfectly above board, ethics in a Hallmark Christmas movie. Like, gosh, I don't want to spoil it for people that haven't heard it, but but like, people can't cheat on each other in a Hallmark Christmas movie, as opposed to Deck the Halls 2, where it was like I wanted to say some very specific things because I think that those are interesting emotions to explore. Like, so Deck the Halls 2 is a lot of that plot is Katie being in this position where, marriage has not turned out the way that she thought it was going to. And she has to make some very difficult decisions. And she's a type A person who has never failed at anything. And now she is failing rather publicly at marriage. And that is a very difficult thing, I think, especially for women, this idea of failure within a relationship and how it reflects upon you. When the truth is that, things happen and life happens,
Yeah.
and like it is really hard to pick a partner because you can't always predict how people change. I got very, very lucky with my partner. I got married pretty young. I was 25. And it could have very easily gone the other way. I you know, who knows who anybody is when you're in your 20s.
Right.
But because of the some of the societal pressures on women, like a lot of times you make that decision early, you make it based on things that are not necessarily the best choices. Me personally, like I made my decision on my husband based on something that I felt pretty solid about, but you know, it was a professional thing. He believed in my writing and he was willing to support me and really, really wholeheartedly, emotionally support me in what I was working on. And that to me was something that was very rare in relationships.
Oh yeah.
It's very difficult in general to find partners that are understanding and supportive of your creative work. And I want to say, like, I just had a lot of boyfriends that were just super not jazzed. Like it's like the talent would pull them in at first and they would be like, ooh, intrigued. But then the more you show time and time again that, like, you know, oh yeah, I'm super, super good at this. Like they don't always love it. It's a weird, it's kind of like when milk goes sour. Anyway, so it was very interesting to me, this concept of Katie dealing with that, but then also, this is a spoiler, but you know what? I'm just going to go with it.
You've been warned, folks. You've been warned. Here we go.
So Stu is this person that she finds a great deal of comfort in. Like this idea that she sort of ends up treating him as a fake boyfriend, like she's emotionally projecting on him and she's depending on him in a way that is not based 100% in reality at the moment. But I like so much this, but I also like him as a romantic partner for her, because so much of what she needs as who she is a very smart, driven woman, is this man who is so supportive and so open and just very uncomplicated. Stu is a very unfettered person. He basically has two modes. There's like golden retriever, and then there's philosopher Stu. We like bringing out philosopher Stu every once in a while, like because he provides the kind of clarity that only an unfettered person can. And I like this idea of portraying women that aren't totally perfect, that do have flaws, that have glaring errors in their personality, but then also giving them a romantic partner that is totally there for it and isn't like wishing that she would shout less or be less intense or be less smart in his face all the time.
Yeah.
You know, someone who actually values her for that. Again, bringing it back to 10 Things I Hate About You. Well,
and I've seen a trend now that you say that. All of a sudden, Love and Crazy Ex-Girlfriend pop into my brain.
Mm-hmm.
Characters along that line too.
It's very much it's a strong message to present.
Yeah.
Because the truth is, I think the most compelling love stories involve people that are flawed, finding people with flaws that suit them. You know, and because we all have the things that the behaviors that make us stick out, the things that make us feel like we don't fit in. And being totally 100% accepted by someone for everything that you do is the best. It is so cool.
Yeah.
I gotta say, man, like it is, if you have that in a relationship, lock it down. Like that is all you're looking for. That is the only thing. You know, that's what you need. I mean, yeah, like keep an eye out for like credit card fraud and stuff like that. But you get the idea. Like
that aside,
you want someone that is not that is supportive of you, that is open and accepting, but also someone that doesn't feel like that your strengths diminish theirs. That's
right.
Sort of the flip side of the coin.
Right.
Anyway, so that was a big part of Deck the Halls too. That was that I don't know if it was because of 2017 or I think I probably would have gotten there anyway, because it's something I talk about a lot. It's something I think about a lot.
Well, and it may have been. I mean, I don't know how people could do the same. It would just get stale for me to do this, structurally.
Oh yeah.
With an arc, do the same kind of thing. So it could be a number of factors.
Oh yeah, you got to change it up some.
Oh yeah,
and I can tell you too that at the very end of the first Deck the Halls, I told Ian, who plays Trip, because we were talking about doing a second one, and I was like, oh yeah, I think I'm gonna kill off Trip's dad, and he was like, what? And I was like, okay, maybe not. But I bringing in that character to play with was so fun. Like writing terrible characters. Like I love someone who is a charming asshole. They're so fun to write.
That's the truth. That is so true.
And I based so much of that character. I just sort of stole things that I've overheard my dad say. I love my dad so much, but he had home persona and he had business persona. And so business persona I borrowed from a lot for writing Trip's dad. So it was really, really indulgent.
Well, we got to know now. Does dad know this? Did you tell him?
Oh, my dad? I can't remember. I don't remember if I discussed it with him.
I've always wondered, how people would react to it. I've never done that myself. Especially those assholes. I've based a asshole character on you. So I was curious, since it was your dad, if you had or not.
Well, really the thing about this character is, like, I mean, the final scene for him fills out the picture, and you realize, like, oh, he's an asshole, but he's not like a total asshole.
Right.
He's just abrasive. It's, I honestly, I'm not sure that my dad actually listens to my stuff. And honestly, if he did, I'm not sure he would hear himself in it. Cause I've certainly seen that, like, when I write voices the way I hear them, people usually don't see themselves in your work.
You're right. You're absolutely. Even the villain is the hero in their story. Nobody sees themselves like that. So now that folks have fallen in love with you and they want to find the stuff you're doing, where do you want to send them to out there on the interweb? Where can they look you up, follow along, check out some of your stuff? Well,
for the podcast, I believe that we're on pretty much all of the major things. So SoundCloud, Stitcher, iTunes are usually the first places I direct people. That is Sasquatch Radio, SASSQUACHRADIO. And of course, for Deck the Halls with Matrimony, when you look it up on your podcast joint, it is Deck the Halls, parentheses, with Matrimony, ! In parentheses. And I say that because there's a lot of Christmassy things. Or like other programs that are not ours that are just called Deck the Halls, and they come up first. So there's that. I believe we've been working on a new website. I think maybe by the time this goes live that it'll be online. So sasquatchradio.com. My sort of slightly defunct, maybe hopefully not for too much longer, comics website, sasquatch.com, is, where I used to put up all my drawings. You can buy Santa's Husband on Amazon or at your local bookseller this Christmas. Please do. Yeah, go call your local bookstore, call your library, and be like, do you have Santa's Husband? And then when they say what, you can explain. And hopefully this holiday season, besides the Deck the Halls podcast, I will be putting out a little slight supplemental material for Santa's Husband.
Oh, cool. Nice little sneaky treat there for you folks. And folks, on a serious note, unless you're, I don't know, still using an iPod, and I'm not judging you because I still do, I will link all of her stuff. So if you're on your phone or whatever, just look for those links in the show notes and you can click right over to them. Ashley, you've been an absolute, it is a joy. I love talking to comedy writers. They're just so much fun. But you've been a joy, and you really, really helped explore a topic I think that's really important for folks to spend some time thinking about, and how it applies to themselves as human beings first, and then as creatives as well. I want to thank you for coming on and giving us so much of your time to talk about something I really truly feel is important and very helpful to other people. So thank you for that.
Thank you for having me. And hey, listeners, if you're feeling lonely listening to this, or you've been feeling lonely, do listen to Deck the Halls, because you're who I'm writing for. I wrote that. I wrote it because I wanted something to keep people company. And that's why I do it. So you're who it's for.
That is such a cool humanistic thing. I absolutely love it. You're an epic person, as we say on this show, Ashley. You are absolutely epic. This has been Horrible Writing, and hopefully after this episode, you suck less than you did at the beginning. I am Paul Sading, your host extraordinaire. You can find me over on the Twitterverse @WritingHorrible and over at paulsading.com/horrible-writing. Until next time, suck less.